Welcome to Exposing Workplace Bullying, where we pull back the curtain and have real conversations about workplace abuse. This is episode 14, When Bystanders Cross the Line. I'm your host, Dr. Jan Kircher. I want to tell you a story about someone I knew, a woman, let's call her Mary. She was hired into a new position. The interesting part about this was no one in the department wanted that job, and they had to hire someone outside. But almost immediately, the department chair decided he didn't like her, and he was vocal about it. And the bullying began as soon as she stepped foot onto campus. Private reprimands, public humiliation in meetings, yelling at her office door, calling her names. But here's the crucial part. It didn't just stop with overt bullying. The chair orchestrated a campaign. Bystanders, her own colleagues, joined in. In meetings, they piled on. They were mobilized. Even students were encouraged to file complaints with the dean, and many of them did. The professional and personal toll she went through was immense. By the end of the year, Mary was called into the dean's office and pushed out. It was so hard on her, but fortunately, she found another job and was able to get out. Mary's story isn't just an isolated case of one department chair gone rogue. It's a blueprint for how bystanders are weaponized in workplace bullying. And I know because I've seen that blueprint play out firsthand. Bystanders often cross the line. They start engaging in the bullying too. That's when the workplace changes. It's not just Bob bullying you anymore. Betty the bystander joins in. She piles on. Why? Because she can, and because it benefits her. I had a lot of Bettys in my workplace too. And so you're faced with a dilemma because these are your colleagues. How do you work with them? How do you even navigate that? Well, interestingly enough, when I was faced with the bystanders at my work crossing the line, I was gaming a lot and was playing a game called World of Warcraft. It's also known as WoW. It was a coping mechanism and a way for me not to think about the bullying when I was home. But there was one line that a forsaken character, the undead, said. She said, "Trust no one." And that comment really resonated with me. It became my motto or my filter of how to deal with bystanders who cross the line. Basically, don't trust them. And that's what I did, not because I was paranoid, but because they proved time and time again that they couldn't be trusted. The thing is, it's so natural for us to want to trust the people you work with. But once you've been bullied, you learn pretty quickly who's on your side and who never was. So my motto at work became simple. Trust no one, especially bystanders. And anytime I had to deal with them, I was on high alert because you didn't really know who would be showing up. Would it be Betty the bystander who wanted to sling mud at me? Or Betty, your colleague, who was also a coffee connoisseur? It was often a crapshoot because in bully culture, bystanders show up in different ways depending on the day of the week. I often refer to them as chameleons, blending in or changing who they are depending on who else is watching them. But how do they do it? How do they join in without looking like the bad guy? Well, they often do it by becoming what I call accomplices, the kind who use policy, process, or professionalism as a cover. They look like they're just doing their job, but really they're doing the bullies. In a master's program I was part of, I saw accomplices in action. Every student needed a committee of 3 faculty, 2 people from inside the department and 1 from outside. Normally, committees were split along a pretty clear line. Those of us who were being bullied tended to end up together, and those who weren't had their own circle. But every now and then, you'd end up on a committee with a bystander, someone who was there to do the bully's bidding. When we had to schedule a meeting, that's when the games started, when the accomplice steps up to the plate. They were horrible. The accomplice would drag the meetings out, be rude to both the student and me, and nitpick the thesis to death, line by line, revision after revision. Not because the work was bad, but because they knew it would make things miserable for me. Every time they forced a change, it meant more work for the student and ultimately for me. To pass, a student needed 3 signatures, and any committee member could withhold theirs. So it became a game of jumping through arbitrary hoops. And when I had an accomplice on the committee, they made it damn near impossible for the students. Sure, it hurt me. Those meetings were brutal. But the part that always got me was that it also hurt the student. Someone who just happened to choose me as their chair and was just trying to finish their degree. And that's the power of the accomplice. They could make it difficult for both me and the student while maintaining the perfect excuse. They were just making sure all the T's were crossed and the I's dotted. It wasn't nitpicking for fun. It was policy. And if I made a big deal about this, I would have looked bad, not the accomplice, me. But accomplices are not the only type of bystander. There's another one, the ones that get their orders straight from Bob. These are what I call participants, active participants. They're the echo chamber. Participants repeat what Bob says, laughs at his jokes, and validate his behavior. They want to stay on his good side, so they join in. Now, you know that I dreaded faculty meetings, but not everyone felt that way. Some participants loved them because they were an opportunity to turn them into cesspools. I remember one meeting where we were discussing a student's application to the major. I personally believed the real reason some were against her was because she was a strong self-advocate, someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the faculty in the department. I stated my support for her, professionally and calmly. And the moment I finished, Bob jumped down my throat. His reaction was immediate and vicious. But it didn't stop with him. It was like a switch flipped. Betty piled on. then Brian, then Bob, then Betty, then Brian. The dominoes just fell, one after another, all on me. By this time, I had gotten used to being bullied and actually came to expect it in these meetings. I would prepare myself for it. But this time, it was like rain hitting the roof, one drop after another, and it seemed to go on forever. I was being mobbed by the entire room for daring to have a dissenting opinion. It turned into this ugly kind of competition. Who could be the cruelest social worker today? And on many occasions, Betty outperformed Bob. That's the active participant effect in its purest form. They don't just repeat the bully, they try to outdo them. Because in bully culture, the more you imitate the bully, the safer you are. It was sick, frankly, just sick. But you might be thinking, well, Jan, that doesn't sound all that bad. Consider this. We had faculty meetings every 2 weeks for 2 hours. That's 2 guaranteed hours of bullying, with your bully going after you and the bystanders piling on. It gets old mighty quick. But that's how it becomes your normal. Bullying and abuse just weave themselves into the fabric of your work culture. It becomes what's expected, not just from the bullies, but from the bystanders too. They're encouraged, and yes, even rewarded to engage in bullying behaviors. But not all bystanders are willing to take part so openly. Some of them, when you caught them alone, would tell you how bad this place was. They'd say it straight. Yes, Bob's a bully. This place is toxic. They'd tell you they'd wish it would stop, that they hated the way things were. And me, I always gave them ideas for what they could do. I mean, really, how about just do something? And they'd nod along and say, yes, Jan, you're right. I can do that, and I will do it. But when push came to shove, there they were, heads down, saying nothing, enabling Bob. The enablers are the worst because you often share your pain with them about what's happening, and they acknowledge it. They know you're being hurt. The enablers give you false hope in a place that's already pretty hopeless. You start to think that someone's on your side, that maybe the next faculty meeting will be better. And then you realize, no, it isn't. And this happened more than once until I finally remembered, Jan, trust no one. I just wanted someone in the workplace I could trust, but that was not meant to be. The reality is, bystanders really do come in all shapes and sizes. And we've talked about some pretty horrible ones. But I did save the best for last. The spy. The bystander who are spies, they act friendly. They check in on you, pretend to care. Maybe even share a few stories about how awful the bully is and how they've been treated by the bully. They'll come to your office, close the door, and say, you didn't hear this from me, but I think you're right about Bob. What you don't realize is that everything you say is going straight back to Bob, word for word. The spy's job is to gather intel, information, your reactions, what you're planning, who you're talking to. They play both sides because it makes them feel important. Spies get to look loyal to everyone while staying out of the line of fire. And you only figure it out when something you said in confidence suddenly shows up in a meeting, twisted, exaggerated, or used against you. That's when you realize you were never having a conversation. You were being recorded in real time by someone serving the bully. There's a mole in our midst. I'm sure you know by now that bully culture isn't a great place to work in, and turnover is always high, so we were constantly hiring. A new batch of people came in, and they were quickly slotted as bystanders. But to be honest, they weren't adjusting well. You know, a couple of these new hires would come to my office. They were upset. We'd have coffee, dinner, talk about what was happening. And I tried to encourage them, like a good colleague should, to give them ideas about what they could do or how they could handle things. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It's damn hard to stay positive and give new colleagues advice when you're working in a total shit show. I'm just saying. Then one day, the bully came into my office and started parroting something I'd said to one of these new hires, word for word. I remember thinking to myself, now that sounds like something I would say. And then it hit me. It was something I had said. I hadn't been talking to a colleague who needed support. I'd been talking to a spy. Someone planted by Bob to see what I was saying, to report back, to feed the machine. And I'll tell you, it took everything in my power not to go down there to his office and rip that guy a new one. I wanted to tell him exactly what a coward he was and how dare he do that to me. But I didn't. In fact, I don't think I said another word to him. Never looked at him again. Not even worth my time. Not then, not ever. And if you're wondering if it paid off for him, it certainly did. Hired, tenured, promoted. And that's the part that sticks with you. Not just what they did, but how much better they came out for doing it. They didn't just survive the bullying, they were rewarded over and over, promoted, praised, protected. Meanwhile, you're left standing in the wreckage, just trying to figure out how someone could climb higher by stepping on you. And what kind of system operates like that? That's the kind of thing that doesn't leave you quickly. It stays in your body. It changes how you see people, how you walk into rooms, how you hear laughter in the hallway. Because it's not just about the harm, it's about the injustice of watching cruelty pay off. Obviously, this is something I still struggle with, and I imagine you do too. We don't talk about it enough. The trauma caused by bystanders, the ones seen as neutral observers. Their silence causes harm. Their inaction hurts. But when they cross the line, and they engage in bullying themselves, that's a secondary betrayal that cuts even deeper. We talked about this back in season 1. It's like the bullying cuts you, and then the bystanders make sure it keeps bleeding. And it's the hypocrisy that gets under your skin. How they act like they're not part of it, while Betty's over there ripping you a new one. Because when you realize that betrayal pays off, they get hired, tenured, promoted. It hits a different kind of nerve. It's not just anger. It's the slow, quiet trauma that settles in when you understand the system rewards the people who hurt you and punishes the ones who survive it. That silence, those actions, that's what stays with you long after the meeting ends, even after you leave those jobs. And frankly, I had a lot more bystanders than I ever had bullies. So it wasn't just one person piling on. It was 8 or 9, depending on the day. That's a lot. And it's hard to explain what that kind of constant pressure does to you. Because when that many people are involved, you don't just feel attacked. You feel surrounded. And that kind of isolation, it's suffocating. You start to question everything, your memory, your reactions, even your sanity. Deep down, you know this is the goal of the bully, to make you question who you are and to see yourself as less than. You stop wanting to say anything to anyone, because if you talk about it too much, you sound like you've lost it, like you're going off the deep end. If you say, "My colleagues are out to get me," you sound paranoid. But it isn't paranoia. It's real. It's your reality. It's the silence of a whole group pretending nothing's wrong. That silence makes you feel invisible while they get ahead on the pain they caused you. And I could never understand it. Why were people so weak, so complicit? They could just hang their heads while I was being abused. We're the ones being bullied, yet we're the ones still showing up, doing the work, taking the hits, and trying to fight back. So why can't bystanders find the courage to just speak up? It would make such a difference if bystanders actually did something, wouldn't it? That's what we're going to talk about next week in episode 15, the power of bystander action, what true intervention looks like, and the difference between performative help and real support. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If this episode hits home, check out stopbullyculture.com, where I share tools, resources, and real talk to help you deal with workplace abuse. And if you know someone who needs it, share it with them. Until next time.
They gaslight and plot, play their games. Witnesses smile, you're part of the shame. Your boss stays silent, closing the door. How many voices will they ignore? The bully lies, the brave get burned. The office watches, no lessons learned. Your boss hides, truth gets colder. It's time to stop the bully culture.